This war didn't begin in madness or ego. It wasn't sparked by one man waking up with dreams of empire. It was calculated, measured with a ruler, traced across a map, and driven by centuries of fear etched into Russia's strategic memory. Ukraine isn't the obsession. It's the lock on the door. And what happens next will determine whether Europe rests in peace or braces for a far larger conflict that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. To understand why this war was inevitable and why it may not end where most people expect, you have to stop chasing headlines and start paying attention to geography.
You need to look at a topographical map of the Russian space in Europe to get an idea of what he's after. So Russia's been invaded, and all of the invasions have come through one of 9 of what I call gateway territories that link the former Soviet space to the rest of the world. The Polish Gap, the Bessarabian Gap, those are 2 of the biggest ones, and they are, unfortunately for the Ukrainians, on the far side of Ukraine from Russia. So Putin's end goal here is to plug all 9 of these gaps. Now, when the Soviet Union collapsed, the Russians went from controlling all 9 to just 1. And bit by bit, with the Kazakh conflict, with Nagorno-Karabakh, with the Georgia War, with the Crimean War, they've added bits and pieces back to plugging those gateways. And if they get Ukraine in its totality, they will have merely plugged another 2. Now, that does mean that Ukraine is not the end of the story. It's just the middle of the story. There's another war after this one.
What Zeihan is explaining is brutally simple. Russia doesn't fight for ideology. It fights to eliminate vulnerability. For centuries, invasions have poured through the same geographic corridors, and Moscow's grand strategy has always been to seal those pressure points one by one. When the Soviet Union collapsed, those defenses vanished overnight. What followed were decades of increasingly aggressive efforts to rebuild strategic buffers. That's why Ukraine was never the finish line. It's just one link in a much larger and far more dangerous chain reaction. Strip away the myths, the propaganda, and the comforting lies, and one truth remains. This war was never just about territory. It was about survival, control, and fear. But this is where the story takes a violent turn. As late as the end of 2025, Moscow insisted Ukraine was finished. Behind the scenes, something very different was unfolding. When the calendar flipped to 2026, Ukraine didn't collapse. It surged forward. What followed in the opening days of the new year may go down as one of the most devastating wake-up calls Vladimir Putin has ever received. As 2025 closed, Putin and the loyal inner circle clinging to his power pushed a familiar narrative. Ukraine was exhausted, Western resolve was cracking, and time was finally on Russia's side. The message to foreign capitals was blunt. Accept a settlement that favors Moscow now, or watch Ukraine fall entirely. But that story wasn't just misleading. It was detached from reality, and Ukraine wasted no time proving it. The very first week of 2026 delivered a brutal answer. Instead of retreating, Ukraine drove the war deeper into Russian territory than ever before. The conflict Putin believed he had contained suddenly surged inward, tearing through the infrastructure that sustains Russia's military machine. What unfolded wasn't symbolic. It was operational. It was calculated. And it was devastating. In the early hours of January 6th, Ukraine unleashed a massive wave of long-range drones across vast stretches of Russian territory. This wasn't a single strike, or a lucky hit. It was a coordinated storm, reaching hundreds of miles beyond Ukraine's borders and targeting facilities that matter, sites that fuel Russia's war effort with energy, ammunition, and industrial output. One of the first cities jolted awake was Penza, nearly 400 miles southeast of Moscow. Residents reported a series of explosions echoing through the night. Buildings rattled. Windows shook. Panic spread. These weren't random blasts near civilian homes. Locals pointed to industrial zones, areas suspected of supporting military production. Around 10 explosions were heard, bright flashes lighting up the sky, followed by the unmistakable buzz of drones moments before impact. No official statement was needed. One resident captured the sound of a massive detonation from their window. Clear evidence this wasn't an isolated event. Targets reportedly included a chemical facility, a bearing manufacturer, and a major industrial complex supporting multiple enterprises, some almost certainly tied to Russia's defense sector. Authorities remained silent, but scorched ground told its own story. And Penza was only the beginning. By around 5 in the morning, Ukrainian drones had reached the Republic of Bashkortostan, striking the city of Sterli-Tamak, home to a major petrochemical plant Russia depends on heavily. The facility sits more than 800 miles from Ukraine's border, deep inside territory Moscow once believed was untouchable. It produces aviation fuel and critical chemical stabilizers used in jet fuel, components essential for aircraft carrying glide bombs and launching missile strikes. Residents reported explosions. Smoke rose into the air. Officials attempted to downplay the damage, but photographs told a different story. Even if catastrophic destruction was avoided, the intent was unmistakable. Ukraine was targeting the arteries that keep Russia's war effort alive. But the night wasn't over. In the Kursk region, Ukrainian drones struck one of the most sensitive targets imaginable, a major ammunition storage complex supplying Russia's ground forces, airborne units, and missile systems. Smoke poured from the site. Explosions continued for hours. Authorities evacuated nearby areas, an unspoken admission that something had gone horribly wrong. This wasn't a minor depot. It was a logistics hub where artillery shells, missiles, and munitions are stored, prepared, and distributed to units fighting in Ukraine. When it burned, it wasn't just infrastructure that was lost. It was future firepower. Every shell destroyed, there is one less shell falling on Ukrainian soldiers tomorrow. Every explosion eased pressure on Ukraine's defensive lines. Ukrainian officials later confirmed the strike achieved its objective. Ammunition detonated throughout the night, compounding the damage. And once again, the distance mattered. Nearly 560 miles traveled by those drones underscored a terrifying reality for Moscow. Ukraine can now hit critical military targets far beyond what Putin ever anticipated. Still, Ukraine wasn't finished. Later that same night, another strike ignited a fire at a major oil facility in the Lipetsk region, just south of Moscow. Officials tried to obscure the details, vaguely labeling it an industrial site, but the truth emerged quickly. Firefighters battled the blaze well into the day. Explosions were recorded. Ukraine openly acknowledged the operation as part of its campaign to degrade Russia's military-economic base. Lipetsk's proximity to Moscow sent a chilling message. This wasn't just about damage. It was about reach, about demonstrating that nowhere is truly safe anymore. Reports soon followed of drone activity near other sensitive sites across Russia. Some attacks were intercepted. Others caused damage officials were reluctant to fully acknowledge. In one tragic incident, a downed drone crashed into a residential building, killing one person, a grim reminder that once unleashed, war eventually consumes everything in its path. Russia's defense ministry rushed to release interception figures, claiming dozens of drones had been neutralized. But numbers don't erase smoke rising from oil depots. They don't undo evacuated neighborhoods. And they don't explain why critical military facilities were burning across multiple regions in a single night. What makes the opening week of 2026 historic isn't just the scale of one night. It's the pattern. Ukraine has launched long-range drone strikes every single day of the new year. Moscow itself has become a routine target, no longer reserved for symbolic moments. Airports have shut down, energy facilities disrupted, logistics strained. Ukraine is no longer reacting. It is dictating tempo. Behind this surge lies years of preparation. Throughout 2025, Ukraine steadily expanded its long-range drone production. One manufacturer alone is now producing thousands per month, machines capable of traveling nearly 900 miles at a fraction of the cost of traditional missiles. That scale translates into sustained pressure, day after day, night after night. At the same time, Ukraine has dramatically increased domestic missile production, ensuring its ability to strike deep no longer depends solely on external supply. Affordable long-range munitions are entering the battlefield in large numbers, reshaping the cost equation of modern warfare. The economic impact on Russia is already being felt. Intelligence assessments suggest the country is barreling toward a recession sooner than previously expected. Energy disruptions, damaged logistics, and rise in defense costs are piling up, and Ukraine is pushing harder, faster, and deeper to accelerate that collapse. This is why the start of 2026 matters so much. It's not just a strong opening. It's a declaration. Ukraine is signaling that the war has entered a new phase, one where Russia's depth no longer protects it, where its industrial base is under constant threat, and where the illusion of control is rapidly disintegrating. Putin wanted the world to believe Ukraine was finished. Instead, Ukraine has just begun.